Let me tell you about some really cool military weapons that have been used around the world for many years. These are serious pieces of equipment that soldiers still use today, and each one has its own interesting story. First, let's talk about the RPG-7, which is a 40mm rocket-propelled grenade launcher. Now, when you hear RPG, you might think of those role-playing video games, but in the military world, RPG stands for something completely different: rocket-propelled grenade. Think of it as a big tube that shoots rockets, kind of like a super-powered version of those bottle rockets you see on the 4th of July, except this one is designed to destroy tanks and armored vehicles. The RPG-7 is what soldiers call portable, reusable, unguided, and shoulder-launched. Let me break that down for you in simple terms. Portable means one person can carry it around without needing a truck or anything like that. Reusable means you don't throw it away after shooting it once. You can load it up with another rocket and use it again and again. Unguided means that once you fire the rocket, it just flies straight ahead, and you can't steer it like a remote-control airplane. And shoulder-launched means the soldier puts it on their shoulder to aim and fire it, kind of like how hunters carry rifles. The story behind the RPG-7 goes back to the old Soviet Union, which is what Russia used to be called before it broke up into different countries after the Cold War ended. The Soviet engineers were really smart people who had already created something called the RPG-2 before they made the RPG-7. But they wanted to make something even better. So they improved their design and came up with the RPG-7. Today, a Russian company called Basalt makes these weapons. It's kind of like how different car companies make different models of cars, except this company makes military weapons instead. Here's how the RPG-7 actually works, and it's pretty fascinating when you think about it. When a soldier pulls the trigger, a gunpowder booster charge explodes inside the tube. This explosion gives the rocket a really big push to get it started. Kind of like when you're on a swing and someone gives you a big push to get you going. Once the rocket leaves the tube, it can fly up to 500 meters away. To help you understand how far that is, imagine 5 football fields lined up end to end. That's about how far the rocket can travel. The rocket flies pretty fast, too, reaching a maximum speed of 295 meters per second. That's way faster than any car you've ever seen on the highway. In fact, it's so fast that if you blinked, you'd miss seeing it fly by. But here's something interesting that might get a soldier in trouble. When the RPG-7 fires, it creates a big cloud of light gray-blue smoke. This smoke is kind of like a big arrow pointing to where the soldier is hiding, because it shows exactly where the shot came from. Enemy soldiers can see this smoke and figure out where to shoot back, which is definitely not good if you're trying to stay hidden. So why did the RPG-7 become so popular around the world? Well, there are several really good reasons. First, it's incredibly tough and rugged. You can drop it, get it dirty, bang it around, and it will still work. It's built like those old pickup trucks that just keep running no matter what you do to them. Second, it's really simple to use. You don't need to go to college or take years of training to figure out how to operate it. A soldier can learn to use it in just a few days. Third, it doesn't cost as much money as some other fancy weapons, so countries that don't have huge military budgets can still afford to buy them. And fourth, it actually works really well at destroying what it's supposed to destroy. Because of all these great qualities, the RPG-7 became the most widely used anti-armor weapon in the entire world. Think about that for a second. Out of all the different weapons that all the different countries could choose from, more of them picked the RPG-7 than any other similar weapon. Right now, about 40 different countries have RPG-7s in their military forces. That's like having the most popular video game or the most popular song, Except this is a weapon that countries use to protect themselves. Not only do lots of countries use the RPG-7, but 9 different countries actually make their own versions of it. It's kind of like how different companies make their own versions of smartphones. They all do basically the same thing, but each company adds their own little improvements or changes. The RPG-7 is especially popular with what military people call irregular forces and guerrilla fighters. These are groups of people who aren't part of official government armies, but they still need weapons to fight with. They like the RPG-7 because it's easy to get, easy to use, and really effective. Now let me tell you about something completely different called the SPG-9, which is a 73mm recoilless gun. Before you ask what recoilless means, let me explain that with a simple example. You know how when you're standing on a skateboard and you throw a heavy ball forward, the skateboard rolls backward and you might fall down? That backward push is called recoil. Well, this gun is specially designed so that when it fires, the person using it doesn't get pushed backward. It's pretty clever engineering when you think about it. The SPG-9 is what soldiers call an anti-tank grenade launcher. And just like the RPG-7, it was developed by the Soviet Union. But unlike the RPG-7, which one person can carry on their shoulder, the SPG-9's much bigger and needs to be mounted on a tripod. You know those 3-legged stands that photographers use to hold their cameras steady? It's basically the same idea, except much bigger and stronger because it has to hold a weapon instead of a camera. This weapon is also described as man-portable, but don't let that fool you into thinking it's easy to carry around. It weighs 60 kilograms, which is like trying to carry around 2 large dogs at the same time. Because it's so heavy, soldiers usually transport it in a vehicle like a truck or a jeep until they get close to where they need to use it. Then 2 soldiers have to work together to carry it to the right position. The good news is that once they get it set up where they want it, they can have it ready to shoot in about 1 minute. The SPG-9 shoots really interesting ammunition. The rounds it fires are fin-stabilized, which means they have little fins on the back, kind of like arrows or darts. These fins help the round fly straight through the air without tumbling around. The rounds are also rocket-assisted, which means each one has its own tiny rocket motor built into it. When the SPG-9 fires one of these rounds, first the main gun gives it a big push, and then the little rocket motor kicks in to make it go even faster. These special rounds are designed to be high-explosive anti-tank ammunition, which means they're specifically made to blow up tanks and other heavily armored vehicles. When the round hits its target, it explodes with tremendous force. The rounds can reach a maximum speed of 700 meters per second before their little rocket motors burn out and stop working. That's more than twice as fast as the rockets from the RPG-7, which shows you just how powerful this weapon system is. The Soviet military officially started using the SPG-9 in 1962. It was brought in to replace an older weapon called the B-10 recoilless rifle. It's kind of like when your family gets a new car to replace the old one that wasn't working as well anymore. The military wanted something newer and better, so they switched to the SPG-9. Let me tell you about another fascinating weapon called the DShK, which is a 12.7mm heavy machine gun. Now, you might see some people calling it a sniper rifle, but that's not really accurate. The DShK is actually a heavy machine gun, not a sniper rifle, even though it shoots really big bullets. This weapon was designed by the Soviets and has an official name that's really long and hard to pronounce. It's called the WWII large caliber, named after the engineers who designed it. The Soviets used this machine gun extensively during World War II and continued using it for many years afterward. Now, Some people might think that because the DShK shoots such large 12.7mm bullets, it would make a perfect sniper rifle for picking off enemies from really far away. But that's not what it was designed for, and there are good reasons why it doesn't work well as a sniper weapon. The main problem is that it weighs around 34 kilograms. To give you an idea of how heavy that is, it's like trying to carry around a medium-sized dog everywhere you go. A sniper needs to be able to move quietly, hide easily, and carry their weapon to different positions without being detected. Try doing that while carrying a 34-kilogram machine gun, and you'll quickly understand why it's not practical for sniper operations. The DShK can definitely be used for anti-material purposes, which means shooting at equipment, vehicles, and buildings rather than people. But its primary roles are as a heavy machine gun that provides support for infantry soldiers, and as an anti-aircraft weapon that can shoot down low-flying enemy aircraft. It's designed to lay down lots of heavy firepower quickly, kind of like having a really powerful fire hose, except instead of spraying water, it's shooting very large bullets, very rapidly. Next up is the ZU-23 anti-aircraft weapon, and the name pretty much tells you what it's designed to do. Anti-aircraft means it's specifically built to shoot down airplanes and helicopters. This weapon was developed back in the late 1950s, when military planners were getting worried about enemy aircraft flying low to attack their ground forces and important buildings. The ZU-23 was engineered to engage what military people call low-flying targets at a range of up to 2.5 kilometers. Now, 2.5 kilometers might sound like a really long distance, and it is when you're walking, but for aircraft flying through the sky, that's actually considered pretty close range. The weapon could also be used against armored vehicles like tanks when they got within 2 kilometers of the gun position. The main purpose of the ZU-23 was to provide direct defense for troops and strategic locations against air assaults. These air attacks were usually carried out by helicopters and low-flying airplanes that would swoop down to attack ground targets. Having ZU-23 weapons positioned around important areas meant that enemy pilots would have to think twice before flying in low, because they knew they'd be shot at. The Soviet Union really believed in this weapon system and ended up producing about 140,000 units. That's an enormous number when you think about it. Imagine having enough ZU-23 weapons to give one to every person living in a medium-sized city. Other countries thought the ZU-23 was pretty effective too. So Bulgaria, Poland, Egypt, and the People's Republic of China all got permission to manufacture their own versions under license agreements. Finally, let's talk about the PM-38, which is a 120mm mortar. If you're not familiar with mortars, they're kind of like cannons, except instead of shooting straight ahead like most guns do, mortars shoot their shells high up into the air so they come down on top of the enemy. It's kind of like throwing a baseball really high, so it comes down behind someone who's hiding behind a wall. The PM-38 120mm mortar was the standard heavy mortar used by the Soviet Army during World War II. What made this weapon special was that it combined 3 really important qualities very effectively: firepower, range, and relative mobility. Firepower refers to how much damage the weapon can do when it hits something. Range means how far away it can shoot accurately. And mobility means how easy it is to move the weapon from one place to another when you need to change positions. To help with moving the PM-38 around, it came equipped with a wheeled trailer and something called a limber, which is basically a special cart designed to transport the mortar and all its ammunition. Even with all this transportation equipment to help, the complete system weighed 557 kilograms. That's incredibly heavy. It's like trying to move around a small car without an engine. Despite being so heavy, The PM-38 could shoot its shells up to 5,700 meters away. To help you understand that distance, it's more than 3 miles. You could shoot from one end FOI, a small town, to the other end. The mortar used 2 main types of ammunition: high explosive rounds that create big explosions and cause lots of damage, and smoke rounds that create huge clouds of thick smoke to hide friendly troops from enemy observation. Operating the PM-38 wasn't something one person could do alone. It required a team of 6 soldiers working together to use the weapon effectively. Some soldiers would be responsible for loading the heavy shells into the mortar tube. Others would handle the aiming, making sure the mortar was pointed in exactly the right direction. Still others would do the mathematical calculations needed to figure out exactly where to aim based on where the enemy was located and how far away they were. Even though the PM-38 was designed and first used during World War II, which ended in 1945, people kept using these mortars for many decades afterward. Various countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union continued operating PM-38 mortars long after the war was over. In fact, there are documented cases of soldiers still using PM-38 mortars in Ukraine, Moldova, and Turkmenistan as recently as 2016. That means this weapon design was still working effectively more than 70 years after it was first created, which really shows you just how good and reliable the original engineering was.